Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jared Prugar, and I am joined by my good friend and co-host Kevin Quigley. Kevin, Penn State went to West Lafayette, Indiana, and handled their business with relative ease against Purdue Saturday afternoon. It was a sight to be seen. They put up 49. They only allowed 10, and they're one win away from yet another 10-win season.
Yeah, and probably most importantly is something that you and I have honed in on is beat the spread, 28-point spread, and they win by 39. Um, was did they want to give up 10 points on Saturday? No, probably not. However, in their 49-point win, they did build up a lot of depth. And it was not a 100% starter defense on the field at all times, and it was not a 100% starter offense at all times. So, yes, they still put up 49, probably running 75% starters, 25% depth players, and they built up meaningful experience. And they looked dominant. They ran the first team offense for a couple drives, made sure everything looked good, and they said, "Yep, we're going to open this thing up." And Tysier Denmark got in there on offense, and then on defense, you name it, they were playing cornerback or safety. Tamir Robinson looked good as the middle linebacker, as a depth guy, and then probably 15 people played on the defensive line. So just an all-around great performance. James Franklin calls it the best performance for the team this season, and kind of have to agree with him.
Right. He's honestly not wrong. Drew Aller was impressive. 17 and 19, 247 and 3 touchdowns. Um, Added, I think, 22 yards on the ground. And that's what you need from a guy like Drew Aller. You need that type of performance. You need that when you need it the most. This is obvious. Every game from now on is a must win. But, if there's ever a litmus test, you look at common opponents. And Purdue, unfortunately for them, they've had the Texas, the Oregons, the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Indiana. So, you look at what you've done against those teams, or I'm sorry, not Texas, but Notre Dame. But you look at what they've done against those teams and how they all fared. Penn State goes in, handles business 49-10. Anytime you can get a big win like that, it's great. But they were able to get some guys in, like you mentioned. And that's the biggest thing. It's adding that depth, because now, if they hadn't played up until this point, or even played one game up to this point, they will, out of the next three, even if they play three here, players that haven't done that will still qualify for the redshirt year. The postseason does not have any impact on that, which is great. So now you're getting guys that have maybe some fresher legs than you're used to, like Tysier Denmark. I thought he looked good in the return game. You got that going for you, and then get those experience and get them that way. It's not their first game's experience when they're lining up in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and also you're not burning up your starters. You're not risking them getting hurt because it's 49-10 late in the game. Drew doesn't need to be in the game. Nick doesn't need to be in the game. Katron doesn't need to be in the game. The only starter really in the game late was Amin Vanover, and he is a second string, but they just play 4, 5, 6 defensive ends every week. So Amin Vanover is probably the only like big rotation guy that was in late in the fourth quarter. Um, yeah, and like you get those guys valuable experience because I mean we saw it. KJ Winston plays the first week of the season, hasn't played since. Doesn't sound like he's out for the year. Maybe he's available for the playoffs should they get there or the bowl game or whatever. But you got to build up that depth. DeJuan Lane, guy is a freshman. Davian Collins is still looking good. He's gotten to play a second game in a row now, and it seems like he's just making an impact. Probably had a interception on Saturday that I forget what happened on that one. It's blanking in my mind right now, but another close call at getting an interception. Like it just feels like it's a matter of time. And he's kind of playing into that third cornerback role, right behind AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber. So you're getting guys a chance. They've been in the program. They've seen the game film. They've seen practice. They've been in practice. And now they're learning how to watch the scheme. And you're seeing the guys who can put tape into their game plan, which is it's just awesome to see just kind of what the future holds. And like Luke Reynolds gets in the game and scores his first touchdown as a Nittany Lion. What was that, a 44-yard pass? Uh, no, sorry, 24-yard pass to Luke Reynolds. So, yeah, it's you can't really read much from the Purdue game, but Big Ten experience is Big Ten experience. Road experience is road experience, and the game finishes under the lights too. So
Absolutely, and I think that's the biggest thing too is for them. Penn State played a complete game, 539 for total yardage. Again, they put up 49 points. They had 305 pass yards, 234 rush yards. The penalties were very minimal. They were pretty successful on third down. They won the time of possession game. There were no turnovers for either side. They didn't give up any sacks. So, I mean, it's one of those performances. It's just what you need. This Minnesota game, we're going to talk about this here later this week, but this is a tough one. This is a tough Minnesota team, and PJ Fleck always has his guys ready, and it's not easy. Obviously, they beat USC earlier this year, but again, for Penn State, they handled business the way that they needed to. They got Tyler Warren involved, and further etched his case to be called to New York for the Heisman ceremony. You've got Katron Allen getting in the receiving game. You've got Nick Singleton being involved heavily in the run game. You've got Bo Prabula running the football. Luke Reynolds, Trey Wallace. There are just so many options here and so much depth. But for Penn State, when you're 22 of 27, 305 for 4 touchdowns between 2 quarterbacks, that's a really good situation.
yeah, and it's everything you could ask for. Is the Purdue defense Swiss cheese? Yeah, sure, but they are still D1 athletes. They might just not have the peak that everyone else does, and you're just gonna get you're getting good game film. You're getting good exposure. Felt like they added a couple wrinkles this week on offense. Tried a couple of different things there too. So just a good week. Good game against the Boilermakers, and then yeah, we're going to shift our focus to Minnesota later this week, and that's probably a game where you're going to need more depth. It's a team that can pull out some big wins, and it's a road game at 3:30 Eastern on CBS. So could be a tough environment. Not a noon kick, not quite a night kick, but like you said, PJ Fleck's going to have those guys ready to play. So went into West Lafayette, got the win, and that's all that matters. We're on to Minnesota.
And we're going to be on to the second segment when we come back from this break on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. He's Kevin. I'm Jared. Kevin, 2 of the biggest playmakers for Penn State coming into the season performed above their expectations, I thought, on Saturday. And the first one I want to talk about is Tyler Warren. We touched base a little bit about him in the first segment, but Tyler Warren's putting himself in the conversation to be invited to New York City as a Heisman candidate. And the reason why are games like yesterday or on Saturday, he had 63 yards on the ground, 127 through the air, and a touchdown each, both on the ground and through the air. Now, the one thing that I thought was the most intriguing to me was that of those 127 yards that he had, 96 of them came after the catch. That is some absolutely insane yardage. But number 2, that means 2 things. 1, he's great after the catch. He's got great hands and he can get downfield. But 2, they're finding him and getting him open in big, big ways.
Yeah, the offense is not schemed to get anybody else open, which is a problem. We could probably talk about that later with the lack of wide receiver involvement. But if your tight end puts up 190 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns, I don't think you're complaining about your lack of production in the wide receiver room, because if you have that much of an athlete that you could just find the ball to, and I think of his 8 targets, or of his 8 receptions, I think all 8 came in the first half, and maybe 7 of them were in the first quarter. So looked like he was going to set on pace to set another record. The game score ended up not allowing him to play the entire game, and rightfully so. He shouldn't have played more than he did, but Yeah, it's 2 quarters of football. You put up 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, that's New York worthy.
Absolutely, and that's not saying that he's going to win. I think it's going to be Travis Hunter and Ashton Ginty with my beloved Boise State Broncos, who pulled out a squeaker against San Jose State over the weekend. But Tyler Warren is putting up some really really good numbers, and I want to pull up, Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers for Georgia in 2023, up until he got hurt this time last season, was expected to be a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, and then obviously that did not happen. But we're going to compare here just a little bit. I think that's going to be something that could be really fun um, for us. But that's you want to look at Brock Bowers, right? So Bowers had a total. This is his total. 56 receptions, for 714 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, we're going to take out the Alabama game because that happened I guess just prior to the Heisman ceremony, but he missed the weeks in between that. So he had 714, and then you take away that 53 performance. He had 661 yards through 9 games. All right, now we're going to look at Tyler Warren's statistics this year, and there are a lot of comparisons, and I think they're very very warranted, which is fair, because Warren has done a great job, but he's impacting this game unlike any other player is doing on the offense. You look at kind of what he's been able to do in the run game. He's thrown the ball as well, and he's hauled in 7 receiving touchdowns. So I mean, or I'm, yeah,
He has five
and
receiving touchdowns, 67 receptions, 808 yards,
right,
and 5 receiving touchdowns, while also adding 157 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. So he
right.
has
So he's got
9
9 touchdowns,
and 1 through the air as well.
right? So he's got 10 total touchdowns and probably close to over 1,000 yards um, total offense. There is not a player that is this type of player for another team, except maybe Travis Hunter, and Ashton Genty as well. So that's why I think that he deserves to be up there. And the guy that's kind of, for me, kind of pivoting to the defense, the guy that's flying, I don't want to say under the radar, but you don't always hear his name, is Abdul Carter. And Carter has been an absolute monster of late defensively. He had 5 tackles on Saturday against the Boilermakers, 2 tackles for loss, and a QB hurry. And this is all while being double teamed. And lo and behold, they finally called a holding that he finally engaged in. And I think that's one of those situations where you just don't see that. You haven't seen him get that holding penalty called, but he's doing a phenomenal job on the defensive front for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, he sure is. And I was just looking at his stats too. He has more sacks this year than he had last year, which doesn't feel right. But he just had such a slow start to the season. Um, he switches positions in the off seasons. He's got to learn how to be a new edge rusher, and that took time. And I don't say I was writing him off, but yeah, he's finally evolved into that elite pass rusher that we all thought he could be, but he didn't quite show it early. And now that we're in Big Ten play, it's just he's ramped it up the last 2 weeks. Defense has been playing in the backfield. Yeah, and what more can you say about him? I mean, I think he has more tackles than he had last year, less assisted, but like also how many QB hurries does he have, or how many assisted sacks does he have? Not that he was involved with the tackle, but his pressure or the double team that he caused allowed other players in the defense to get home. So he's just been a game wrecker. Maybe he's not putting the most prolific stats out there, but eight sacks on the season says otherwise.
Yeah, and I think
Six,
that's the
six
crazy
and a
thing
half
too.
sacks. 6.5 sacks, excuse me.
No, absolutely, and I think that's one of those situations where, you just kind of look at the overall body of work, and it's just it might not have started very well against West Virginia, but looking at the other games, Bowling Green 7, Kentucky or Kent State 4, Illinois 7, UCLA 3, plus that's a tackle and a half for a loss against USC 5, Wisconsin 3, Ohio State 4, Washington 6, Purdue 5. So I mean, he's the stats are there, but he's just quietly doing that, and it's weird to say that he's quietly doing that with the statistics that he has. But you're right, he's drawing a lot of double teams, which is exactly what a good pass rusher does. He's opening things up for the other guys along the line. But also, I think again, early in the season, a lot of people like yourself kind of wrote him off a little bit, even though the stats are starting to back him up.
Yeah, and part of my hesitation to him just being a pure pass rusher was it kind of limits his ability to be Abdul Carter, the football player. And I think, especially in college, if you can do, the Penn State defense has two of them. They have two football players in both Abdul Carter and Jalen Reed, where they're kind of positionless. They can play multiple positions on the field, and they can just go and be game wreckers. I think, yes, Abdul Carter has a more direct impact on the game now because he is that close to the line of scrimmage. He's finally learning how to be an elite pass rusher. He's rushing the quarterback well. He's getting sacks. He has tackles. I think he has 11 tackles for loss, maybe. And so, like, his in-game impact, like you don't hear his name on every snap because he's not flowing to the ball. He's not trying to deflect passes. He doesn't have the interception. He had one last year. But it's shown that, like, man, he doesn't need to be Abdul Carter, the football player. Like, he is more than capable of just being Abdul Carter, the defensive end. But it also gives them flexibility if they do want to put him at outside linebacker or whatever for a snap and bring in another defensive end and go 3 DNs on the defensive line. They could do that too. So definitely a refinement of skills. He's definitely improved on the skill as he's had more opportunities to do it. But yeah, well, a big evolution for him and props to him. And clearly the NFL is taking notes because apparently his family was sitting near Drew Rosenhaus on Saturday. So
Yeah, good company to sit in if you're in the league or going to the league, and he will undoubtedly be going to the league. I think one of the things that people tend to forget is when you look at stats and the accrual of stats, it's so many times though for Abdul is they're running away from him, and these quarterbacks are getting the ball out lightning quick. I mean, that happened against Bowling Green. That happened against pretty much everybody. You get the ball and the ball is out, and I think that's a testament to the skill that Abdul Carter has. They don't want anything to do with him because you're right, he can disrupt the game. He can interrupt the game with some brute force. But for the Penn State Nittany Lions, he's playing lights out right now. And that's what you need this time of year. Yeah, okay, 2000 like early in the game, early in the season, 2 tackles here, 2 tackles there, whatever. But now's where the playmakers need to start picking up their slack. And for Penn State, again, we talked about this quite a few times. They're number 4 in the country for a reason. So they have to play like the number 4 team in the country every time they step on the field, if not the best team in the country when they step on the field. And when you have guys like Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter doing that, you're in a really good situation, especially with the way things are lining up with the playoff.
yeah, certainly. And we're going to find out how good the number 5 team is coming up this week as well, because Indiana's got to go to Columbus. So Penn State's shown that they validated their rankings. Teams above them had some issues. Teams behind them lost. They just put another win on the schedule there, and their stars are rising to the top. But they also did build good depth this weekend. So all around good performance. Can't say enough. Despite
That's
it being
right.
Purdue, despite it,
And
so many comments out there just like, but it was Purdue, but it was Purdue, but it was Purdue. Who cares?
still have to execute.
49-10, 39-point win. It doesn't matter who you are in college football. Sure, Notre Dame put up 66 points against Purdue. Who cares? Did Notre Dame leave their starters in the whole game? Maybe. I don't know. But Penn State had 4 and 5 minute drives to start, and then pretty much every other touchdown drive was under 3 minutes off the clock. Like, just the first couple of drives, it felt like Penn State's offense could do whatever they wanted, and they did. So it was more just like, I don't want to say they were toying with Purdue, but they were definitely just like, let's see if this works because we might need this later or that later, and felt like that's what they did. And they executed.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the biggest things for Penn State. They keep winning, and for us, we keep trucking along. We're going to join you on the flip side, on the other side of this break, for the third and final segment of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lashing Out podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. I'm Jared. He's Kevin. Kevin, you mentioned teams behind Penn State losing on Saturday, and BYU loses a heartbreaker. They were number 6 team in the country, and then number 7 Tennessee also lost, providing a nice little shuffle of the AP rankings here coming into this week. Now, it's the same top 4: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, PSU, Indiana. Going to find out a lot about Indiana when they play the Buckeyes to sort itself out. But then you've got Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Miami, Boise State, and then the disrespect of SMU is out of this world.
Yeah, man, tough sledding for the ACC with Miami and SMU being at 11 and 13. Disrespect, rightfully, for the ACC, but tough look if you are the ACC. Tennessee, man, game started out well for them. They're up 10-0, and then Georgia Hanks 17 points in the second quarter. Just kind of ran away with it. Really impressive performance from Carson Beck. Got down 10-0, and really put on two impressive touchdown passes in the second quarter there, like elite level throws. And this is what Georgia fans have been wanting from Carson Beck all season long. So is he capable of doing it every week in and week out? I'm not sure. He's not shown the ability to do that this week or this season, but yeah, I mean, impressive win for Georgia. They needed it. I kind of thought Tennessee were frauds. Hung with Georgia, smacked him in the mouth early, but then Georgia's able to pull away. So maybe frauds is too strong of a word for Tennessee, but definitely not in that elite company. Boise State, man, almost went down 21-0 to San Jose State. I was watching that game there for a while. I think San Jose State had first and goal from the 3.
Yes, and they not only did they hold them, but San Jose went full idiot. And on their 4th down play, they called a trick play.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was supposed to go to the guy that it went to. I think it was supposed to actually go to the tackle. And they ended up not getting it, and also getting illegal touching because it was an illegal man downfield. And from there on, it was really just Boise State. And they came back, clawed back. San Jose got, right there at one point. I think it was in the third quarter, but then they had another mishap, and poof, Boise State is leaving that game victorious.
Yeah, they are. The other thing Min mentioned was the teams ahead of Penn State struggling. That was Oregon. Man, they had that night game in Camp Randall, and the offense did not come to play at all. Pull up 16-13, which makes Penn State's win against Wisconsin at 28-13 look that much better, right? You have that common opponent. It looks good for Penn State to have that common opponent with Oregon, and man, Oregon just did not look right, and they only benefited from Wisconsin not being able to get a first down in the second half. I think Wisconsin punted their last however many possessions, but it was 3 and 4 play punts. I mean, there was zero offense from Wisconsin, and until I think they had a holding call that pinned them back into like close to their 10, they punted. Then Oregon got kind of a decent return inside the 40 of Wisconsin. They only had to go 10 or 15 yards to even get into field goal range. So that ultimately ended up deciding the game. But man, if you're Oregon, that's a tough road game, and that kind of puts into perspective 49-10, right?
Right.
Winning is hard week in and week out. You go on the road, You're making long trips across the country, especially if you're Oregon, and you got to show up and play the game as well as you can. And Oregon escapes with a win, but that's an ugly win for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of those things now. You got that in the rearview mirror. But you want to look at, we're going to preview some of these matchups and talk a little bit more about them later in the week. But, you know, one of the most intriguing ones to me is that Army Notre Dame game. Army is still undefeated. And you want to talk about criminally underranked. They're number 24 in the country. I do think that SMU is going to win the ACC. Big 12 is back up for big grabs. And we could get a Coach Prime in the playoff.
Yeah, I just to go back to the back end of the top 25 of games that happened. Florida beats LSU in the swamp. That was ugly.
And there's no better coach or no better time than when Brian Kelly loses.
Did you see?
I do think that when Brian Kelly loses a game, especially one that he should win, that an angel gets its wings.
Did you see that Brian Kelly would say we're going to learn the words to the Tom Petty song that Florida plays before the fourth
Florida
quarter?
social media and content team, dogs, man. They were absolute dogs.
So in case you guys didn't see this, Brian Kelly in the week leading up was talking about his team was going to have to learn the words to Tom Petty because they were going to be celebrating going into the fourth quarter because they were up so big. And then Florida flips the script on them, and then the UF social media team quote tweets the video on X this morning, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and said, "Hey Brian, do you know the words yet, or do you know the words still?" Man, dude, that was so good. Missouri was the 13.5-point favorite. South Carolina puts up an impressive last-minute drive. You know who else is impressive? Good Dog Beverage Company. Good Dog. This episode is brought to you by Good Dog Beverage Company. Good Dog offers a variety of products, including zero carb, zero sugar vodka cocktails and bourbon hard seltzers. Also, whiskey cocktails that only have 3 grams of carbs and 3 grams of sugar. Through Good Dogs Leverage the Beverage program, they donate a portion of the profits from every case sold and 100% of the merchandise sales profits to provide service dogs for people in need. You can go to gooddogbeverage.com. That's good. DOGG beverage.com to find merchandise and the closest retailer carrying Good Dog beverages to you. Elsewhere in the back end of the top 25, Washington State loses on the road at New Mexico, and Arizona State traveled to Manhattan, the Little Apple, and upset Kansas State. So tough weeks for the back end of the top 25. College football is awesome this year, man. There's so much parity. No one really outside the top 10 seems to be threatening the top 12, and
Right.
anybody in that last 5 of the top 25, like 20 to 25, 19 to 25, whatever that range is in the back end, it just seems like there's a constant revolving door at the back end, it's awesome to see.
And I think that's the beauty of this college football playoff and this college football model now. You know, obviously the extended playoff is huge because now 12 teams are fighting for those spots, and there aren't a lot of runaway characters this year. For Penn State, they're still slated to be about 6. Again, it's going to be Oregon or Ohio State who wins the Big Ten. But, you know, a thing they kind of work to look out for is say Indiana does lose, which I think is going to happen against Ohio State. If Oregon slips up, that's a 4-way tie, I'm sorry, for first place. Now, of course, I do think it would end up being Oregon and Ohio State still playing in the game solely because of win-loss record against each other. So Oregon has 1 win. Ohio State would be 1-1, and that would beat Penn State's 0-1, and Indiana's 0-1 as well. But there's just so much that can and is going to happen. Obviously, the rankings come out again on Tuesday, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where Penn State finds itself when these playoff polls come out.
Yeah, there's 2 weeks left. Conference championships may not apply for this season, but yeah, it's just fun to see. Louisville also went to Stanford and lost. think they were 19th. So, yeah, college
The way
football.
that Louisville lost that game was just insanely awful football.
Four
Because
down.
they lost, they didn't run any clock. They were tied. They turned the ball over, and
On downs.
then
They didn't throw
yeah,
a pick. They didn't fumble it. They went for
no,
it on like 4th and 10 from the Stanford like midfield, like 45.
after an incompletion and a spike,
Yeah, they spiked it
and
on first down, threw it deep on second down.
yeah, it's just like, okay, what are you doing? And then they probably have the Cardinal dead to rights, late hit out of bounds, then delay a game on a 57-yard field goal attempt, delay a game, or and then an offside or something makes it a 52-yarder, and he bangs it home, and the Cardinal win.
Yeah, what an awesome ending. I saw that ending on Instagram today, I think, and it was like, would you believe that this team lost to regulation without throwing a pick or a fumble? Oh, man, that's why it's the greatest sport on earth, man. Just every week,
That's
every
right.
week we get random things that happen. It's like, yeah, I need to watch more games. Much to the ire of my wife, probably.
That's fair. I'm in the same boat. But now Penn State heads to Minnesota. 3:30 kick on the East Coast. 2:30 kick in Minnesota. And now they got to keep winning. 2 games left. One more on the road. One more at home. Coming up. You got to keep taking care of business, and good things will happen. For Kevin Quigley, this has been Jared Prugar on the Lashing Out Podcast and the Sports Now Network. Thank you, as always, for listening.